This program is brought to you in part by Royal Bank Financial Group, bringing you alternative format publications, one customer at a time.
Hello, welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Ken Kavanagh. Work is an important and, in many ways, defining part of most people's lives. It's a crushing moment for anyone to be laid off, fired, or downsized. I know it's happened to me. Until recently, was, though, a natural consequence for people who were injured on the job. On today's program, a look at some new options for injured workers. How are they developing, and how effective are they? Dofasco is a steel manufacturing plant in Hamilton, Ontario. It has downsized from about 10,000 workers to 7,000. They are a non-union operation. Some former employees who were injured on the job claim that they were fired during the downsizing because of their injuries. A group of them have taken action because of that situation.
How many people here were fired by Dofasco because of their injury? Vern?
Absolutely, Stan. I was let go without any options at all. No severance pay, no sick benefit, no compensation. Bang, right out the door.
And Mark, what happened to you? Did you get fired?
I was fired, yes, Stan.
And Chris, what happened to you?
I was let go. I don't know if that's fired or just let go.
And you got fired because of your injury?
Yes, I did.
George?
I was fired.
Might as well. I
You
was
were
after
fired?
26 years.
You were 26 years worked for
Almost
Dofasco,
26.
and they fired you because of your injury.
Terminated.
Terminated you. What happened?
They gave me the option that I'd take a severance package or they'd have me fired within a year, and I was under so much duress at the time. I was broke. I was almost going to lose my apartment. I'd lost a vehicle and a house.
So they forced you.
Basically, yeah.
You're a crane operator, right?
Yes, I am.
And you hurt your back because of that. Did they offer you any kind of work that would, that you're able to do, or?
No, my case is different. They didn't offer me a replacement job at all.
That your own doctor?
George Wodomski had 25 years of service at Dofasco before being injured on the job, and he's organized a group of injured workers to protest their firings. An organization called SHAFT.
SHAFT stands for So How Many Are Fired Tomorrow. The purpose of SHAFT was to have a support group for other injured workers. So we got all this together, and now we help people, our group and other Dofasco employees with compensation issues, human rights issues, in any way that we can help them. Once I had got this group together, we had discussions and we said, no, how are we going to handle this? We're together, but we need somebody to represent us. Now, Mark and Vern had been speaking to Stan Gray before they had met me, and we had a meeting, and I asked Stan would he like to represent us, and from there on, Stan has been doing our fighting for us.
I've compiled a report on behalf of SHAFT, the organization who I represent, of 21 cases of workers who were fired or terminated because of their injuries. And they're people from a wide spectrum of jobs. They're male and female. And the fact that we've seen so many cases across a wide spectrum, it's not just a couple of disgruntled workers. We have workers with 25 years seniority, 26 years seniority. We have millwrights, we have electricians, we have janitors, we have crane operators, we have engineers, all of whom were very productive workers for Dofasco for 10, 15, 20, 25 years until the moment they got injured, at which point they find themselves on the fast track out the door. And to me, this represents not just a case we look at one by one, but it's a policy. I think it's a systemic policy by Dofasco. So what we have asked the Human Rights Commission to do is to lay a charge of systemic discrimination against Dofasco, in which we take all these cases and not only reinstate these workers or compensate them, however the appropriate remedy is, but we want certain remedies in there that changes the policy and practice of Dofasco. They have to be ordered to have programs that accommodate, not target their injured workers. And that has to be monitored by an outside agency. We want the Human Rights Commission, in conjunction with community groups that represent disabled people, and in conjunction with a group from the workers, to monitor Dofasco's compliance with the Human Rights Code. I think a lot of this has happened at Dofasco because the employees have not had an organization to represent them. They haven't had a union. Dofasco, unlike Stelco in Hamilton, is not unionized. And you don't see these kinds of gross abuses happening in unionized workplaces because the workers have an organization to represent them. Apart from unionizing, the only way that injured workers are going to get a lot better respect and accommodation of companies is to do in larger scale what Shaft is going to do. They got to put public pressure on. Governments ultimately are responsible to the population that elects them. And I think that groups like Shaft have to make these abuses known, have to put the pressure on the governments to enforce the human rights laws, to enforce the health and safety laws, to enforce the compensation laws. In the 90s, because of the corporate changes that are going throughout the world, the power of unions, the power of workers is diminished. And that's very unfortunate because the results of that process are the victims that we've seen here today from Dofasco, not only Dofasco, but a lot of other places. The extent that workers are disempowered is the extent they're going to suffer the consequences of corporate actions and corporate greed. They're going to get hurt at work, they're going to get injured, they're going to get fired and terminated and abused. The same process that has led to the disempowering of workers and the strengthening of corporations has seen corporations take over a function that should have been supervised and regulated by government, that is the management of disability.
Brian Mullen is the Director of Human Resources at Dofasco.
From my position in relation to disability management is interest from when I was working within the plant, but as Director of Human Resources, part of my responsibility is to ensure that we have programs in place that suit the needs of the company and of the employees. Are we successful in every case of individuals returning? No. I don't think any disability management program is perfect. They can always be better, and we are actively working to make it as good as it can be. People with an injury or disability are an active part of our program. We take a team approach to disability management. The employee has to be involved. The employer has to be involved.
In the past, most injured workers would have just lost their jobs. But there's a trend today to more corporate management of disabilities. But just what is disability management? Is it a good thing? And why is it any better than the system that it is slowly replacing?
I think disability management is a good thing because it's one of the best methods that I've seen for an organization, for an employee, for labor, to really work together because they all have the common goal of having the employee back to work healthy, happy, and productive. It's one of the things within an organization that everybody has as a common interest.
Rochelle Morandini works in Richmond, British Columbia, where she's a consultant to organizations who wish to start up their own disability management program.
Historically, a lot of union and management relationships have been adversarial. Their arbitration systems are adversarial. Even the WCB appeal process is very adversarial. Disability management, on the other hand, when operated properly and effectively, is a collaborative system.
Ellen Pugh has repetitive strain injuries. She's still in an adversarial situation with her employer. She works on a computer keyboard, lives in Keswick, Ontario, on the shores of Lake Simcoe, but unlike the Dofasco workers, she has a union.
I have Raynaud's syndrome, which is a cold sensitivity in the hands. I have myofascial pain syndrome, which is tendons and muscles knotting and causes spasms. I have chronic tendonitis, which I get in the wrist and upper shoulder. I also have thoracic outlet syndrome, which is pinched nerves up in the top of your neck. I have a really hard time keeping up to the pace, the workload. Every technological change increases a workload, and I have difficulty keeping up to the workload that is asked. And the keyboarding gets really extremely hard to do. By the end of a shift, I can barely move my fingers without pain. Chris, your hot chocolate's ready. I feel that I'm a long-term liability to this company. I have a union that's been very good. The union has filed grievances. As part of the grievance that I had filed for accommodation, we did suggest that there was other work that I could do. There's other work that I could do right in the office that I work in. I did ask too for, I said there's voice recognition for computers, there's split keyboards. There is other long-term calls which I could do at work. that would slow down the workload. I've asked for all that. They said no, it's too expensive to do that. I'm always stopped by the cost.
I really ensure that when I talk about costs, I don't just talk about financial costs. I really start out talking about the human costs that are associated with disability. Those are sometimes human financial costs and the financial burden of the employee and their family, but also the costs in terms of how does a disability or its ongoing ramifications impact the employee and their family.
Am I going to have trouble when I get back to work, pal? We filed grievances for accommodation. I have lost those grievances. I feel I want to be part of society. I want to work. I want to hold down a job like everybody else. I want to give back to society. And I feel that I'm being pushed out of what I know. Come on, Bluey. I have fear for the injuries of the workers of today in the technological age of computer keyboarding.
I was hurt in a logging accident in 1977. It was the 50 on the job. A 50-foot alder tree broke my back and severely damaged my spinal cord. And it took me about 5 years to make the transition back out of a wheelchair to the way I am today, using below-knee braces and one cane.
Since his injury, Wolfgang Zimmerman has worked long and hard to get the concepts of disability management up and running. His first focus was on the logging industry in British Columbia. He lives just outside Port Alberni on Vancouver Island.
In less than 6 months, I was back at work. Then 4 years later, as part of the major cutbacks that happened in the early 80s with the recession, I ended up losing my job. And it took me some 6 years to get back into a full-time job with the company.
How did you do that?
It became really a major political and public relations battle, if you will. Unfortunately, at that time, and even today, we don't have legislation supporting reintegration of injured workers. There were two things. One, I had gotten back to work and knew I could still make an enormous contribution, and it was extremely important to me and my family. The second part was I knew that if I lost the attachment to an employer as large as McMillan Bloedel is, then I would never have an opportunity to find. The odds were stacked against me of finding a job ever again anywhere else. All of a sudden at home, you don't know whether you're going to have a job, whether you're going to be able to support your family. My wife supported what I was doing 110%. If it wasn't for her support and her ongoing support, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, and would not have been able to really try to advocate and struggle all those years.
In the middle of such beauty, tranquil inlets, old-growth trees, industry is in high gear. On Vancouver Island, logging is a way of life for many workers. And McMillan Bloedel has major wood manufacturing centers in Port Alberni. The National Institute of Disability Management and Research is also located in Port Alberni on the campus of North Island College. The Institute is directed by Wolfgang Zimmerman.
What the Institute really is a labor management partnership. It was conceived as a joint industry union commitment towards addressing disability issues in the workplace. It hadn't been done before. And over the course of the last 10 years, we've built a pretty solid partnership between industry and a range of trade unions. And today it's a partnership. There's around 40 different organizations that are directly involved. Well, we're really making a difference for a worker who suffers a disability on or off the job. We have moved from case where I had to fight for my own rights and trying to support myself and my family, fighting the employer, the Workers' Compensation Board, having to deal with the union, which in the 80s had literally not had taken on this issue at all, to where today, if I was working in a mill today that had a program in place, there would be a support structure that would deal with the issue of return to work.
Rick McCrae is a coastal logger who has been active in the IWA, the Woodworkers Union. His union has been consulting with injured workers to try and get a program up and running with one of the forest companies.
When Wolfgang was first injured, we got involved with him at the IWA at the national and local union levels and supported him in his original initiatives and continue to support him in his philosophy of getting injured workers reintegrated into the workplace. Until recently, disability management hasn't been a big part of what we've been doing. Industry, our industry in particular, isn't necessarily interested generally in the well-being of their employees.
Instead, many employers see disability management as merely a cost reduction program. McCrae and his union are trying to mold a program that allows employees more control of their working environment.
Labor perspective on disability management is that we need to work in conjunction with the current suppliers of programs for injured workers, the WCB and otherwise. We know that industry is looking, and government through the WCB and others are looking to offload their responsibilities. We don't want them to offload. We're trying to find new ways, innovative ways to continue to employ people.
There's a common myth out there, and if I can for a moment wear my hat as an administrator for the British Columbia Workers' Compensation Board, it's the union and the employer that have a vested interest to get the disabled worker back to work. Government and the Workers' Compensation Board are huge bureaucracies. They don't have a vested interest per se. One of the difficulties that we face and that we get asked on a regular basis is what type of consultants would we recommend? If you've got just simply a consultant coming in telling the employer this is how we can help you reduce costs, that is what breeds hostility. That is what breeds the antagonism, and this is how disabled workers lose their jobs, because the system becomes slanted. You don't have checks and balances. Some individuals, I think, like Rochelle, have a pretty good understanding.
But give them enough of a break and maybe build them up a bit so we can... Early intervention, which is getting someone back to work as soon as possible, is really at the heart of disability management, and it really goes into what I was saying about event versus process management. What a lot of organizations have done to this point, before really getting involved with disability management, is they have left an employee sitting out there on the systems without any contact from the workplace, without any internal interaction during the very early stages. Then what happens is the workers' compensation or the insurance company, quite a ways down the road, tries to bring this person back to work, and that's when the employer reacts, and that's event reaction.
And Randall Defoe is a Macmillan Bloedel employee who experienced a serious injury, but he's now back on the job.
I had a stroke and lost control of all my faculties, balance, vision, memory, everything. I was a basket case for a while. Howdy. I'm a millwright, wrench puller, mechanic. I have been for about 25 years, I guess now, 24, something like that. And I never thought I'd pull wrenches down here again, but here I am. There wasn't a day went by I didn't think I wouldn't get my job back, but it didn't look very good. It kind of looked like I wasn't ever going to, but I never lost faith that I was going to. So far it's been working out great, and I got to be the happiest person around here, I can tell you that. But the company was behind me all the way. Like, they give me every break in the book. They catered to my every need, so to speak. How's that?
In order to achieve the kind of changes that we want to achieve, disability management, workplace-based, with all its faults, because it's by no means a perfect system, it does exclude a whole range of individuals, will make a difference. When I look at divisions where they bring back 1/3 of their workers that are all of a sudden working at this particular division, they may only be workers that had been there before and acquired a disability. But nevertheless, all of a sudden you've got representation of people with disabilities at that workplace where before you had none.
Any new way of doing things comes up with a new set of problems. Problems that in some instances are just as difficult to overcome as the problems in the system that they're replacing. That's also true in the area of disability management. And what are those areas that should be highlighted, the pitfalls, if you will, of this new and still controversial way of including people who are injured on the job?
I don't want to see disability management become the flavor of the month, which is often common with a lot of type of human resource programs.
The pitfalls is the IWA's perspective and my own perspective, having been involved over the recent past, is not being involved in a process. If you're not involved in a process, then you have no control over the type of product that you'll end up with.
And that's what I'm afraid of, is that with the government walking away from enforcement, the government taking a smaller and smaller role, the companies find it cheaper to fire their injured workers than it does to accommodate them. So I don't see this move towards more voluntary management as a good thing. I see it as a bad thing.
The issue of disability management and the smaller employer and the non-unionized employer is a significant challenge. Disability management is only a partial answer. It addresses a certain component in the whole scheme of employment issues for persons with disabilities. There needs to be some form of regulation, there needs to be some form of standard, so that you don't have one standard in British Columbia and another standard in Newfoundland. Unfortunately, the way we are going in this country, I don't believe that is going to happen. That clearly is a role of government to at least try to establish some of those standards.
I had a lot of support from everybody in here, and it's got to work. It's got to work for other people too, I hope.
That's our show. We'd like to hear about your experiences with employers. Were you laid off because of an injury? How were you treated? And if you're an employer and you have any pointers or suggestions or reactions from the other side of the equation, please drop us a line. Our address is coming right up. I'm Ken Cavanaugh. We'll see you again next week. You can contact us by writing Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W 1E6.
This program is brought to you in part by Royal Bank Financial Group, bringing you alternative format publications. One customer at a time. Call 1-800-ROYAL-97.